Writing a rule to describe a rotation. So we've talked about this a couple of times now, where there are specific rules or ways to see um, with math how it's rotated. So you don't even necessarily need to see it on here. If I'm given the coordinates, as long as I know the rules, then I know how to rotate it. All right, so with this one, what they're going to do is they're going to give us an original, which is DEF, and then they're going to give us a moved one, which is D prime F E prime F prime. So it's with that little apostrophe, you say prime. So in the first one, they want us to identify how did we move D to D prime. And we're rotating this 90 degrees clockwise. So this is the rule for rotating 90 degrees clockwise. So if I take D and I'm rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise, that makes more sense because I'm going back one. So counterclockwise is against the clock, like backwards on the clock. Clockwise is with the clock. So we just have to pay attention to that. So we're going to go back one here, which is why it looks like it's just going back one. If I went clockwise, I'd have to go all the way around. So that'd be a much bigger rotation than just 90. All right. So counterclockwise, we went from this point, which they're telling us is -8, -2. We just need to say what is the new point D or D prime. So we came over to 2 and we're down to -8. So we'd have 2, -8 like this. So if you notice, it's flipping 2 and 8's flipped spots. And then 2 became positive, but 8 stayed negative. So let's see if that follows. So we flipped these two, and then 2 also, before it flipped, it became positive in the Y position. So let's see. If that's true, then my next point should be, and we want to make this one positive, like this. So 1 would stay the same. X doesn't switch signs, according to this. But Y does switch signs, and then we flip-flop them. So let's see, is that where E landed? So we started with E here, and now we have E up here. So we went over 4, up 1. Look at that, over 4, up 1. And by over, sorry, I'm saying, I should say right 4, so you know that it's positive 4. All right, so let's try that same thing down here. So we make Y positive and then flip-flop it. So we have 6, -2. So let's see, is that where F is? We come over right 6, we go down 2. Perfect, we figured out the rule. So it's all we have to do is figure out what do we do with the coordinates, what's the pattern. And then down here, we just have to choose which one is true. So choose the general rule below that describes the rotation mapping for triangle DEF to triangle DEF prime. I'm saying prime only once. All right, so we know we have to flip X and Y. So we don't want anyone where X and Y are in the right spots here. So I'm going to cross all those off because we don't want those. We do know that we want to flip them. So Y is now in the X spot and X is over here. It doesn't actually mean that we change the name X and Y. It's just showing the rule that we flip it. But we also remember we had to change the sign on Y. And the way we show that down here for describing the rule is by putting a negative sign in front of it. Because if you put a negative sign in front of it, if it's negative, it turns to positive. If it's positive, it turns to negative. So by putting the negative in front of it, that shows that we're going to change the sign. So we want the one that has the negative in front. So we don't want any that have a positive Y. So we have two options here. But remember, we didn't want to change X. So we don't want this one either. So this has to be our rule right here. So for rotating 90 degrees, counterclockwise, we flip-flop it. We change X and Y, but first we also have to flip the sign on Y, which is why there's a negative there. So we just have to identify the patterns here. And if you go down here, it shows they select the same one and they have our same points here. All right, so let's go ahead and try this out. Okay, so now we're rotating 180 degrees. It's a different rule than we just tried out. So let's see what we get on this one. So we have triangle DEF and triangle DEF prime. So it's still the same letters. We're just rotating it differently. And it's starting in a different position too. So we rotated it 180 degrees counterclockwise. So counterclockwise means that we're rotating it that way again. So let's go with D. So we started with 1, -5, so that means we went over to the right 1, down 5. So now with D, we go left 1, up 5. So let's type that in. Left 1, up 5. So now X and Y stayed in the right spot because it's still 1, 5, 1, 5. But now if you notice, the signs flipped. So I had +1, now I have -1. I have -5, now I have +5. So let's see if that works. So we know we're going to have 2 and 1, but we want to make sure we flip the signs. We're starting with both positives. I bet we'll end up with both negatives. So let's see, where's E? We have -2, -1. -2, -1. All right, so that rule definitely works. So we're going to write it in the same way, but we flip the sign. And remember, when we pick our rule down here, flipping the sign means that there's a negative in front of it. Because if you put a negative in front of it, if it's already a negative, it becomes a positive. If it's a positive, then it becomes a negative. All right, so let's make sure. So we go over to 4, left, and we go up to 7. Left 4, up 7. Perfect. All right, so we want to only pick ones where X and Y stay in the right spot. So we don't want to flip it this time. So I'm going to cross off all these that are flipped. So we know we want one of these 4. And remember, we're changing both X and Y this time. We're flipping both signs. So we want the negative to be both in front of both X and Y. So these two don't work because we're only changing X on that one. We're only changing Y on that one. We want to change both. So we know, narrowed it down, it has to be this one. Check. Yay. All right, a couple more of these. Clear. Okay, so we want to start looking at this one. We're rotating it 270 degrees counterclockwise. So we're taking triangle RST and we're going to rotate it this way, counterclockwise, backwards on a clock, 270 degrees. So we want to figure out what's the rule for rotating 270 degrees counterclockwise. Let's see. So our first point here, we have -4 because we went left 4, up 7. So that's how they got -4, 7. So let's see, where's R in this case? R prime. We went right 7 and up 4. So right 7, up 4, they're both positive. So they're staying in the same spot. 7 was positive, it's still positive, but now I switched. -4 is +4. So that tells me that X is going to change signs, but Y is going to stay the same. So if that's true, on this next one, we have X and Y the same, but remember X is going to change signs like that. So let's make sure S. So we're going to come over to 5. So we want S prime. Did I count that other one wrong? Let's make sure. Came over. Oh, I wrote it backwards. Darn it. It would help if I was writing it the right way. So we have our right rule. It's supposed to be 7, 4 like that. So that'll help us with our rule here because that makes a little more sense. We came over 7 and went up 4. I wrote it backwards when I typed it in there. So now we did switch X and Y, but X switched signs first. Y did not. So we're going to switch it, but remember to switch the signs on X. So X is +3. I want it to now be -3. So we're going to come over 5 and go down 3. Look at that. We land right where we want to land. So this one, we're going to flip it, but remember to make X negative. So 1, -2. I made 2 negative, and then I flip-flopped them. All right, so let's make sure. So T, we're going to come over 1 to the right, and we're going to go down 2. Look at that. We do land on it. So that's our rule. We flip-flop them, but we also need to change X. So we want to cross off any of these that aren't being flip-flopped. All right, so it looks like all of these options work. Remember, we only want to change X. So only X should have a negative in front of it. This one has a negative in front of Y. We don't want to change Y. Let's see. This one does not have a negative in front of anything, so we know we don't want that one. And this one has a negative in front of y again. We don't want to change y. So this is the only one left that will work. All right, let's check it. Yay! All right, next. Let's clear this. Okay. So we are going to rotate x, y, z 90 degrees clockwise. So we're going to take this and we're going to go 90 degrees this way, 90 degrees clockwise about the origin. We've already done this one. We've already found this rule. We'll find it one more time here. So 90 degrees, sorry, I said clockwise, counterclockwise. I've got to slow down when I talk here. So counterclockwise, which is why we're going backwards from the way of a clock. So x, we start with -5 and 3. So where does x prime land? We're going to go left. It looks like 3. So we're going to go left 3 and we're going to go down 5. So left 3, down 5. We went left 3, down 5. So x and y look like they flip-flop again. But -5 is still -5 over here. +3 has changed to a -3. So we're going to flip-flop it, but it looks like we're only changing y this time. So let's test that. We're going to flip-flop it. They're both 1s. But remember, we need to change this one into a -1. So it actually makes them both -1 in this case. So let's make sure y, we come left 1, down 1. Perfect. We land right on top of y. So remember, we're flip-flopping. Before we flip-flop, the y position is changing. Or not position, sorry, the y sign is changing. So we have 4 and -8. So let's test it. 4 to the right, down to -8. Perfect. So we know we want to flip-flop it. So we're going to cross off anything that's not flip-flopped, just so that we can get rid of it. And then remember, we want to change y to be positive. So I want a negative in front of only y. So this one has a negative in front of only y, so that's a good option. This has no negatives. We know we don't want that one. This has a negative in front of both, and this has a negative only in front of x. So the only option is this one, and this is our mapping. So we flip-flopped, and we change y. Next. Yay, we're all done with another one.